Here's why this is important. If we think about how we operate as human beings, we operate through the use of our mind, right? We are God's highest creations. And what separates us from all other living things that God has created is our ability to think. It's the highest function of which we're capable of. And we think through a process of using our conscious mind and our subconscious mind. Now, these are two different parts of our mind, yet working in harmony with each other, but they serve two different purposes. And in the sales process, the most important thing for us to do is understand this model, because in every dynamic relationship, we're going to access the conscious mind of our prospect and anchor what we want the prospect to do in the subconscious mind. So our conscious mind is our thinking mind. This is where our free will lies. This is our ability to make decisions. Our subconscious mind is our emotional mind. If you're taking notes, I'd like you to write down emotion and write down energy in motion. See, this part of you is where all of your beliefs are stored. This is where all your habits are stored. This is where, all of your self-image, your self-concept resides. The early Greeks referred to this as your heart of heart, your sanctum sanctorum. This is you. When you talk about you, this is the part of you that you're really talking about. The power of this is that our emotional mind is where all of our beliefs are stored, and our beliefs drive our behavior. So in our thinking mind, we can choose our thoughts. Now, we can choose thoughts based on what we see and hear. So we can use our five senses. We can choose our thoughts based on what people tell us. We can also choose thoughts based on what we've thought in the past. We can pull up old memories, and that can influence the thoughts we think. But as we begin to entertain a new idea, if we'll have an idea come into our conscious mind and it makes some logical sense, and we give it a little bit of our attention, then that thought automatically, through a lawful process, it's called the perpetual transmutation of energy law. By law, that energy is then transferred down to our subconscious mind and registers as a feeling. Now, feeling is a word that we describe to define the conscious awareness of our vibrational state. Let me say it again. Feeling is a word that we created to describe the conscious awareness of how we feel. You've all said it, have you ever met somebody and in the first 4 seconds say, I just didn't get a good vibe from that person? Come on, show of hands. How many of you have done that? Come on, show of hands. This is why the camera's on. I can see you. Yeah. And so what are you really saying is you're saying, you know what? I just didn't get a good vibe from that person. There was something that was off, and it happens that quick. You don't have to have a long conversation to know whether you have what we call a micro agreement, whether you're in harmony with that person's vibration. Now, if we feel positive about that vibration, we'll act in a positive way. If we feel negative about that vibration, we'll act in a negative way. So if we have uncertainty, how do you think we're going to act? How do you think a prospect who has the emotional vibration of something's not right here, do you expect them to buy from you? Absolutely not. And the power of this is that our actions then produce what we call results. So if we want to change the results that we're getting in our own lives, or that we're trying to guide someone else to do, we have to change what's going on in the emotional mind. So let's look at it this way. I said in the beginning that sales is a dynamic relationship. And so in every dynamic relationship, there's an originator and there's a subject. We've all experienced this. There's the teacher and the student. There's the doctor and the patient. There's the lawyer and the client. There's the parent and there's the child. And one has authority, not necessarily over the other, but authority in that particular setting, and only in that particular setting, right? Because we can have, and we often do, are the originator, have authority when we're maybe at work, and then at home, we kind of take that hat off and all of a sudden we become the subject. And so when we have a really dynamic relationship between the originator and the subject, we're in perfect rapport. And so what this looks like is, as the originator, as the sales professional, you have an idea, you have a concept. After listening to the subject, you have an idea of what your product or your program, your service can do for that subject. And what you're trying to do is you're trying to communicate the value of what you have over to the logical mind of the subject. But it doesn't stop there, because in order for that subject to really make a move, to make the decision to buy, we've got to get it out of the logical mind and into the emotional mind. We've got to transfer the knowledge we have of our product, our program, and our service, and the certainty that it's the right decision for our subject, bypassing the logical mind and anchoring it into the emotional mind. We need our subject to become emotionally involved, and there's several tools to do this, and the most important one is tonality. Tonality, tonality, tonality. If you've got the workbook, underline it, highlight it. It is critical. It is why we will dedicate, I think it's session number 3, we will dedicate week number 3 to this entire topic of certainty. There are 9 tonalities that you use in order to influence and persuade and build certainty, to establish and maintain rapport. The other tools are gestures, there's images, there's ideas, and there's words. And we're going to talk about all of these today. But these are the tools that we use to establish rapport and to bypass the logical mind of the subject and anchor our idea into the subconscious mind, the emotional mind, where all decisions are acted on, into the mind of the subject. Now, there are 3 delivery systems for these tools: shock, fascination, and agreement. Now, shock could be the use of a statistic that maybe the subject, hadn't heard before. And it's like, whoa, like, wow, I wasn't expecting that number. Shock could also be the use of a particular word that they may not have expected you to use. That would just kind of just makes them, wow, like, what was that? Just for a second, it just kind of bypasses that. It just kind of shocks that conscious mind, and then boop, it goes right into the subconscious mind. Images, certainly we can show pictures. We can even show gestures. We can use certain words, but the most powerful shock is the use of tonality. See that? I can go very fast when I'm talking and become very engaged, and then when I just slow down just a little bit, it makes the subject wonder, like, whoa, hold it, what's going on? There's a shift here in energy. I need to pay attention. And in that moment of time, your idea becomes anchored into the subconscious mind. It happens in the fraction of a second. The next is fascination. We've been doing this since the beginning of time. Storytellers. It's kind of like, hey, once upon a time, right? You're around the campfire. It was a dark and stormy night. So again, fascination, the use of tonality, images, and words. And then there's agreement. Now there's explicit agreement. Those are pretty obvious agreements that we make. But in the sales process, we're going to be talking a lot about micro agreements. The last agreement somebody will make will be an explicit agreement where they say, yes, I want to buy it. But before the explicit agreement, I'm going to suggest that there's probably upwards of 200 micro agreements that your prospect will have to make. I mean, I think at some level, all of us have heard this idea of, us trying to get the buyer to say yes and yes and yes, because then it makes it harder for them to say no. Well, there's an exact law of influence for why that's the case. So let's just really understand why this is important. It's because people make the decision to buy from their emotional mind, and then they justify it with their logical mind. So it's the 65-year-old guy having a midlife crisis who buys the red Corvette and, comes home. He's wanted the car since he was 12 years old. He's finally made it. Now he's got enough money, he can buy it. He buys the car. He comes home and he tells his wife, about the great gas mileage it gets. Right? But it's got great gas mileage and it's really safe. And he's justifying it for logical reasons, but he made an emotional decision when he bought the car.